The next speaker on our program needs little introduction to the students graduating today. Gary Eberle came to Aquinas 25 years ago, and many of you have been in his classes. Classroom activity alone can be overwhelming, but he's managed to become deeply involved in many aspects of the college. He served on a variety of committees: the theater, the historical commission, faculty rank and tenure, the contemporary writers series, and was a member of the committee that identified the design and location of the Hauenstein Library. He founded the college's Insignis program for honor students and is one of the original designers of the Spectrum Scholarship Competition. Gary is chairman of the English department and a prolific writer. He's written several books and numerous shorter publications, and today he can add a commencement address to that list. Please join me in welcoming Professor Gary Eberle.
Let's begin with a story. Once there was a dove who was flying over the earth, and looking down, she saw that from one horizon to the other, the entire surface of the earth was engulfed in flame. Taking compassion on the creatures burning in the fire below, she flew to the edge of the ocean and she dipped her beak in the water, and flying back over the flames, she dropped the few drops of water her beak could hold onto the fire. She returned to the shore and dipped her beak full of water again and flew back over the flames, dropping those few drops of water. But the fire raged on. Again and again she returned to the shore, flying endlessly, until at last, exhausted, she fell into the flames and died, and the fire continued. What in the world kind of story is this to tell on graduation day? This is not a happy ending story like The Little Engine That Could, or Dr. Seuss's book, The Places You'll Go and the People You'll Meet. No, in this more realistic Zen Buddhist fable, the fire continues to rage in spite of the few drops of water that the dove had been able to bring to it. And the dove herself perished, and she never really got to the place she was flying to when she saw the fire. And she herself was consumed by the very flames that she tried to end. And in the end, nothing remained of her or her effort. And yet, deep down in our core somewhere, we feel that the dove's life was worthwhile, that her efforts were not in vain, but I think we're hard-pressed to say exactly why. I think this parable is worth contemplating today, because like that dove, you and I were born in a world on fire. It's burning today with the fires of war, the fires of disease and racism, sexism and poverty. And the flames of this world fire are fed by our own human ignorance, by our greed, by our intolerance, and by our apparently unquenchable appetites for power and control and domination. The world today is on fire, but that is nothing new, because the world has always been on fire. And you and I were born into a burning world when the fire was well advanced, and no doubt the fire will continue to rage long after we are gone. Those of you who are graduating today have spent the last four, or for some of you more years, living a life of privilege. It may not have felt that way to you. It often doesn't feel that way to us. But think about it. That is what it's been. On our beautifully wooded campus, you and I and the faculty and the staff have had the luxury of talking about mostly hypothetical questions about the meaning of life. You've gone through the surrealistic experience of college, in which one minute you're dealing with multivariate calculus and the next you're off to bowling class. You've been given the rare privilege of spending 4, or for some of you more, years in a kind of self-absorption that you'll never again have time to engage in. Believe it or not, never again will large numbers of friendly people want to know what you think and how you think. After today, not many people will ask you what you want to do for the rest of your life. Nobody again will ask you to write poems about your childhood. You're leaving the academic world for the one that we call the real world. And you are leaving this building today full of your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your aspirations, and you're walking out the door into a world that has its own dreams and its own fears and its own aspirations. And those may or they may not agree with yours. You're entering a world on fire, and like that dove, you will have to decide how you're going to react. Will you just fly on above the fire and pretend you never saw it? Are you going to find a cool spot by the shore where the fire won't burn you for a while? Or are you going to take the harder path of that dove and drop by drop dip your beak into the water and shed a few drops on the flames? The problems of the world that we live in are immense. Our ability to solve them often seems very small. Another ancient Buddhist story tells of an early disciple of the Buddha named Avalokiteshvara, a very important character in Buddhism. Avalokiteshvara developed such compassion for all the beings on the earth that he vowed he would help them all. And so he reached out his right arm and his left to help them. He turned this way and then he turned that, aiding everyone that he met. In fact, his compassion was so great, the story says, that he even went into the Buddhist hell to slake the thirst of those who burned in the flames there. But there was no end to the world's need. And when he turned to his left, those on his right called out. And when he turned to his right, those on his left needed him. And when he helped those in front of him, those behind cried out in pain. And he knew there were even more people who were suffering. And so he began to turn faster and faster, first to the right and then to the left, until he turned so quickly, the story says, his head exploded into 11 pieces. We've all had days like that. Days when the conflicting demands of our fast-paced modern life make us feel as though we're flying apart, that our personal center won't hold. Well, as Jesus' disciples asked him, how then, Lord, should we live? How can we maintain the delicate balance between our individual dreams and the world's infinite need? Our 3 honorary degree recipients today are being recognized for their lifetimes of serving their communities. And so I think it is possible, just looking at them, to live in the world and live well without your head exploding. But how exactly do you do that? I'm going to propose a fourfold way that I've found personally useful. 3 of these points come from the Zen Buddhist tradition. 1 comes from a Jesuit priest. But really, they're all universal. And they provide, I think, a summation of the world's wisdom in response to that profound question, how then, Lord, should we live? First, I believe we must learn to meditate, or if you prefer, to pray. Some people begin their days reading from the timeless wisdom of the world's scriptures. Others sit on cushions, others kneel in chapel. Some walk along the lake, others listen to music. Some attend daily mass, and others find nourishment in prayer. And devout Muslims bow 5 times a day to Mecca, the sacred center of their world. But this much is clear. In order to keep our heads from exploding, we must pause and turn our attention to eternal things from time to time. Prayer and meditation remind us that there is a higher power, that our merely human affairs are not the whole show in this universe, that there is an overriding sense and an overriding meaning to it all. And without that sense, then our efforts may feel in vain, and despair sets in. But with that sense, then we know our lives and efforts are not in vain.